Hello and welcome back. My name is Dr. Christopher Gennari, and this is Great Big History Podcast. In this episode, we do Mesopotamia and Babylon. Mesopotamia is literally the land between the rivers. That's the Greek name given to the middle of the Middle East, known as Mesopotamia, because of the Tigris in the north and the Euphrates in the south. The Tigris, Tigris, in the north, and the Euphrates, Euphrates, in the south. These two rivers are going to form the boundaries of Mesopotamia, and the great civilizations like Babylon that we're going to have, modern-day Iraq, are between these two. There's mountains to the north, and there's deserts to the south. So the great civilizations that we have are going to be between these two rivers. Now, here's the thing, and we're going to talk about this a little later, is Mesopotamia is a fishbowl, like New Orleans. The Tigris, which is a fast-moving, smaller river, and the Euphrates, which is the bigger, slower-moving one, which makes it easier to irrigate and canal and has the bigger cities on it. It's the more important. Throughout all of history, the Euphrates is the more important of the two. If you live in Mesopotamia, you live underneath these two rivers. One is to your left and above you, and one is to your right and above you. That's going to make a big difference when things flood. But you are living in a fishbowl. Now, Mesopotamia is divided into three regions, and people start settling in the southernmost of those regions, known as Sumer, S-U-M-E-R. You get your first kings, your first cities around 4500 BCE. Now, there are cities in other places like Jericho that are a little bit older than that, but it's Sumer that's the first real concentration of these cities. So, you get Sumer in 4500 or so BC, and what does that mean? It means if you want to be away from government, if you want to if you're a libertarian, if you want to be independent, if you think all the land is used up and all the old people have all the money and you want to start something new, you move upriver. Upriver equals a frontier. There's less government up there. There's less people up there. There's less protection up there, but there's also more freedom. And so what we see is that as settled society succeeds and is able to defend itself against nomadic invasions, civilization begins to move up the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, so that they move from Sumer to Akkad, and then eventually from Akkad to what's called Assyria. But it's known as Assyria, but only because the Assyrian Empire comes out of there later. They renamed the region. But basically, the Assyria is so far north, it's like Utah. It is the far frontier. It's Wyoming. It's just right. And then there's the mountains, the Tarsus Mountains, and over the Tarsus Mountains is the Anatolian Plateau, Asia Minor. And in Asia Minor, new peoples are moving in from the west, from Europe. That doesn't mean they're Europeans, but they're moving in, and they're going to be known as Hittites. So the mountains, the Tarsus Mountains, is the boundary between Mesopotamia and this other world of the Hittites. So what do those two rivers do is create a region. You could begin in Sumer and end in the mountains in northern Assyria. And so what kings start to do is say, hey, what if I owned all of this? How great would I be then if I conquered all of it? And Sargon, S-A-R-G-O-N, is the first guy to actually accomplish it. He accomplishes it with 5,000 mercenaries. He basically had to conquer the world because he had to keep paying his army. So he hired 5,000 mercenaries. They are so expensive, he had to conquer a city. Well, every time he conquered a city, he then had a choice. Do I pay the troops and let them go home, and then everyone could attack me because I wouldn't have an army? Or do I keep them, but that means I have to conquer more people to pay them? And so he conquered the world because he couldn't let his army go. We'll see this in other civilizations, by the way. So Sargon is the first world conqueror. He looked at his map. He's the first man to look at the map of the world as he knew it and say, I own all of that. It doesn't last long because he's the king of a small city in Akkad, and he's able to do this, but most people don't have that kind of money. And what's going to happen is these small cities of 10, 15,000 people are going to be replaced by a killer, giant, blue whale of a city called Babylon. And there is nothing like Babylon before. Simply nothing. Babylon is the world's first cosmopolitan city. So what does that mean? Well, cosmopolitan breaks down into parts, just like a good SAT word. Cosmo, pol, and Itian. The Itian means of the. The pol is Greek for city, where we get politics from, policies. But it meant city, polis, in Greek. And the cosmo, well, you know, cosmonauts. Space, the universe. It means a universal city. So who's going to live in this universal city? Everybody. Everyone lives there. Well, this is a new type of city if it's going to be cosmopolitan. It can't be based on farming and walls like the old cities. It's got to be based on something new. And what is it based on? Trade. No one in Babylon's a farmer. They're making stuff. They'll buy food. They'll import food from Sumer or Assyria. They'll import food from other peoples because they're going to make higher value goods and they're going to sell them. So this is a new type of city. It's a trade city. It's a merchant city. It's a Venice. It's a New York. It's a Philly. This is new. It doesn't look like any other kind of city. And it's huge because it's a universal city. Anyone can go there. If you want to make money, you go to Babylon. It has more customers. It has more stuff. It has more opportunities than anywhere else. It's London in the ancient world. So it's huge. It's 250,000 people in a world where a typical city was 5 to 10. Plato, writing about the Greeks, said the perfect size of a city is less than 10,000 people because at 10,000, you still recognize most people. Well, 250,000, you forget about recognizing most people. You don't even know anybody. You're in a sea. And so this is a diverse city with lots of different people, lots of different languages. And what is the advantage of this? Wealth and intelligence. The advantages of size. It's rich. Why? Because it has lots of people, which means lots of trade, which means lots of wealth. They're moving, they're selling, they're making, they're hustling. They're also smart because there's lots of people, so they're sharing knowledge. Oh, I don't know how to do that. How do you do that? You're amazing. Oh, I'll show you how. And they're doing things, and then they're spreading knowledge. So you get the invention of bronze tools. You get the lunar calendar. And then you get, more importantly, the spread of these things as people leave Babylon to go to their poopy little towns. And then they show up and they're like, do you know how cool Babylon is? Look at this new fashion. Look at these new tools. Look at this new calendar. You don't even know what this calendar says, but it's awesome. Bronze tools, which allows people to work more efficiently than with wood or with stone. The lunar calendar, which allows people to farm more efficiently so that you know when the best time to plant is, when the best time to harvest is. So bronze tools made working more efficient. The lunar calendar made farming more efficient. It also becomes the cultural hub of the region. You get Gilgamesh, the first major story that everybody listened to or read, if they could read, but most people can't read. So it's a story about mortality. It's a story about how to be a good king and why do we have to die and how do we avoid dying. Gilgamesh tries to live forever in the end. And what he finds out is you can't live forever. The only thing that allows you to live forever is great stories of your great deeds. Now, that's good for Gilgamesh, but for most people, they won't have great stories of great deeds. So what are they left with? How do they live forever? Well, they'll have children. And they'll tell their children their life stories. And they'll tell their children the stories of their parents, of the grandparents. And so that you live on through the stories and the history you tell your children. And you live on biologically too through your children. But you also live on through their stories. You also get the spread of knowledge in the form of cuneiform, writing. For the first time we get writing. Now this is a pictorial writing system. It's not alphabetic, which means you had to talk about cows, you had to draw a cow. Now what happens is people are lazy. And so that cow goes from being all the pieces of the cow to selling just the head and the body of the cow. And then it's just the head of the cow. And then it's just a triangle, which symbolizes the head of the cow. So the advantage of that is people can share knowledge, and knowledge can survive for the first time into generations. Generations can share knowledge with future generations. The disadvantage is it's complicated and you need time to learn how to read. You need education. And so in this class, whenever we talk about education, we really mean literacy. We're not talking science and maths, and we're talking about literacy. You were educated if you knew how to read and write. Because 95% of people couldn't do that. So we get the spread of all of this knowledge. Bronze tools, lunar calendars, Gilgamesh, the story of philosophy, of how to be a good king. You get this stuff written down in cuneiform in a language people will universally use, so they can interchange knowledge. The disadvantage is the same as the advantage. It's diversity. It's cultural power. Babylon is so big that it creates so much cultural power that smaller peoples are jealous of it. Read your Old Testament. The Hebrews are simultaneously in awe of Babylon. Take the Tower of Babel story. If you're looking at the video, you see this giant tower that goes up into the heavens that is so big and people can knock on God's front door. Babylon can build that. The Hebrews can't build that. The Hebrews can't go and meet God. But also, it's too big to the Hebrews. God doesn't want anyone knocking on his front door. That's hubris. That's too much. It's too much. And so God knocks it down. Right? And the Tower of Babel story is the Hebrews' view of Babylon in one story in a nutshell. They are too powerful and they're too much. They are so powerful, it's impressive, but they're too much. And so their cultural power creates jealousy and envy. No one should be that powerful. No one should be that big. There's also the problem of diversity. If everyone is coming into Babylon and everyone speaks a different language, right, the Babel of languages, everyone has different rules. Is a handshake agreement enough, or do you have to sign a contract? I don't know. Where I come from, you spit on your hand and you shook, and that was it. That's all you needed. But my friends in New York, well, you had to sign a contract. Spitting on your hand didn't do anything. It just was kind of gross. Well, whose rules then do we use? Whose religion? Whose gods? If everyone is coming to Babylon bringing their gods with them, whose gods rule Babylon? Who do you pray to for the rains? For the first time we have a problem, how do different peoples with different cultures and different ideas of how to live, how do they live with each other? And Hammurabi, the sixth king of Babylon, will have a solution. Now, Hammurabi is probably our first super king. Sargon has a lot going on for him, but the stuff he builds doesn't outlast him. So, it's kind of a weird thing that he does. Hammurabi, on the other hand, is going to create something that's going to last for the next 2,000 or so years. And that is his law code. He is the lawgiver. So he is our first super king. 1750 BCE, he creates a law code. He is king of Babylon, and so whose rules are we going to use? His rules. All right, so how do you figure him out? Well, he's going to write them down. And in that writing is a mathematical formula. Now, if you said, hey, Hammurabi, you have a mathematical formula, he would probably look at you like you had three heads. He's just giving you the law. But hidden in there is a mathematical formula. And you could figure out the law code. You could figure out basically any law without having to be told it if you know this formula. And this formula is who you are multiplied by what you did divided by who you did it to. Who you are multiplied by what you did, so the worse the crime, the worse the punishment, divided by who you did it to. What does this mean? This means that if you're a nobleman and you punch out the two front teeth of another nobleman, you're going to have the same two front teeth pulled out. It's an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. If, in 72-point font, if you are of the same social class. Right? Who you are, nobleman, multiplied by what you did, punched out two teeth, divided by who you did it to, another nobleman, equals equality. So what I did, I should have the same thing done to me. Well, what if I'm a nobleman and I punch out the two front teeth of a nobleman's slave, right? I'm at a party. We're watching the Super Bowl. I'm losing 42-0, you know. My friend is all razzing me, and I'm like, I'm tired of this. And I go to punch him, and his slave sees that punch coming and dives in front. No! And I punch the slave right in the face. Knock out his two front teeth. Did I do something wrong? Yes, I did. Should I be punished? According to Hammurabi, yes, I should. But are my teeth worth the same as a slave's teeth? Not a forking chance. But something should happen to me. I should be punished. And so the answer is, well, what do I have? I have got money. And what is a slave? A slave is a piece of property worth money. So what do? I have to pay. Let's just say $100 a tooth. I knocked out two teeth, so I pay the owner $200. Done. Okay? What if I punch out? And what if I go to punch my friend, my noble friend? I miss him and punch the citizen, a normal everyday guy who just happened to be standing there behind him. Knock out his two front teeth. Well, he's not a nobleman, so I'm not going to have my teeth pulled out. But he's also better than a slave. So instead of $100, it's going to be $200 or $500 a tooth. So I have to pay this. Now, what if a slave punches out the two front teeth of another slave? Well, same thing. Slave multiplied by punched out teeth, two teeth, divided by slave is equality. So that slave will have their two teeth pulled out. What about if a slave punches out the two front teeth of me, a nobleman? Well, they're going to die. They're going to be taken out back and they're going to be executed. Why? Because in a world where 250,000 people have to live together, 245,000 of them are poor, and probably 100 to 150,000 of them are slaves. There is no world where the rich are going to allow slaves or poor people to think they could get away with hurting the nobility. Because then you're just inviting a revolution. Because if they get the idea of, I can get away with hurting those guys, and there's 1, 2, 3, there's not that many of them. We outnumber them. See the French Revolution, see the Communist Revolution. We outnumber them. Let's kill them all and take their money. That's not going to happen. The rich people are going to make sure poor people think that the punishment they get is worse than the crime they committed. So if a slave punches out the teeth of a nobleman, he's dead. Right? If a citizen punches out the two front teeth of a nobleman, he might not die, but he's going to lose, say, all of his teeth. Again, a punishment better than what the slave gets, but not what a nobleman would get, because they're worth less than a nobleman. So it's an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth if you are of the same social status. If you tell me on the test, what is Hammurabi's law code, and you say an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, I mark you wrong. Why? Because that's not what it is. That's what the Hebrews take. The Hebrews go in Babylon and they take this. Everybody's going to use this law code. But in the Hebrew society, which is how you got it from your Old Testament, everybody was equal. Not equal like literally equal, but equal before God. Equal in the law. Because Moses went up the mountain and he came down with the laws, and the laws apply to all of God's people equally. So they cut off the if. They didn't need it. So since they cut off the if, and they didn't use it, Christians didn't need the if, because they took the Hebrew law books and they took it. They're not going to add the if. So they took it. And so you today, 2,000, 3,000 years later, say an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, as if that was the whole thing. And you forget the if. And that if is the entire reason this law code works. Because everyone considered this to be fair. That's the most important thing. It spreads. Everybody in the ancient world, until the Greeks and the Romans show up with their juries, everyone uses this law code. They think it's fair. Noble people are worth more. They pay more in taxes. They pay more in the chariots. They pay more for self-defense. They are worth more than slaves. They are worth more than citizens. This idea of equality is a modern idea. The word equality does not appear in any ancient language before the Greeks. It doesn't even exist. They don't think of it. So this is fair. But there's a problem. And that problem is women. Right? We talked about eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. That's men. That's citizens. That's men. What about women? Well, here's the problem. Does anybody want to rip the teeth out of the mouth of women? No. But do women do things that are wrong? Yes. Obviously. Everyone breaks the laws. Yes. But does anyone want to punish women the same way they want to punish men? Or okay punishing men? And the answer is no. They didn't feel that way in 1750 BCE. They don't feel that way today. Women and men in America are not punished the same way. At the same rates, to the same level. We just don't. Even for the same crime. So women present a problem. Nobody wants to punish them in the same way they punish men. So then how does the law, the first time we're going to write law down, how does the law treat women? And the answer is, as children. Women are children. They are not responsible for their actions. They're silly. They don't know. They're girly. They're women. They get PMS and they do crazy stuff. It's okay. They're a woman. Now, is that patronizing? Fork, yeah. Is that demeaning? Yeah. But does it also solve the problem of how do we punish women? Yes. Because we don't punish children either. I find it fascinating, the people who are like, oh, children are so innocent. Children, oh, they are so innocent. They're just so beautiful. And they're like, have you ever been in a second grade elementary school class? Were you ever in a second grade elementary school class? Children are awful. They are liars. They are cheaters. They steal from each other. You leave your ice cream and go to the bathroom, that ice cream is gone by the time you come back. You come back 2 minutes later, your ice cream is gone. 4 people have eaten it. And you go, where's my ice cream? Nobody saw nothing. The mafia has more leaks than a second grade class. They're liars, they're cheaters, they're stealers. They give everybody their germs. They're a giant plague factory. Children aren't innocent. Children are terrible. So how do people say, oh, they're so innocent? It's because we don't take the bad things that they do seriously. They lie, they cheat, they steal, and we say, "Oh, well, I will give Johnny a talking to. I'm going to use my serious face. He will have to sit in that corner and not use his iPad for at least 15 minutes. I can't think of anything worse than that. I'll give you an example I use in class of how we think about children versus adults. For those of you who have ever worked in retail, Kohl's, someplace with clothes. But since we're on a video, we're online, we're not tied to anyone's real life experience. So we'll take Victoria's Secrets. In the mall, they sell women's underwear. Do women bring children into Victoria's Secrets to buy underwear? Yes, all the time. Nothing wrong with that. If you're working in Victoria's Secrets, and people have to be working in Victoria's Secrets, right? And you see this woman bring her kid in, like a 3-year-old, and that kid pees all over a bunch of women's underwear. Do you call the cops? No, of course not. You say to the woman, "Oh my God, your child is peeing all over the underwear. It's ruining merchandise." Like, you can't sell that. You have to scrap it. And then you're going to call your manager to give the woman a talking to. And then the manager's going to look at you and say, "Go get the mop." And you got to go get a mop and you got to clean this up. But nobody calls the cops. The adults handle it as you really should be a better mom or dad. Your kid should not be peeing on underwear. But oh well, it happened. Accidents, quote unquote, happened. Right? What if that person peeing on the women's underwear is a 33-year-old man in a trench coat? He came walking in. He goes over to the table where all the women's undergarments are, and he pees on them. Are you saying, "Oh, you really shouldn't be doing that"? Or are you going, "Boop, boop, 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 boop. We have a giant pervert. He's peeing on the underwear. Call the cops. Get this guy out of here"? Yeah, and those cops are going to come swooping in. They're going to come blazing in to catch this guy. Why? What's the difference? It's the same act. The difference is the child is seen as not responsible for their action, and the adult is. The child is an accident. The adult is a pervert. And so women get put into the child category because otherwise they would be treated like men. And nobody wanted to do that. And so this is the way women can avoid punishment. The effect, though, is women are not independent. They are now a ward of their father or their husband. They are not capable of legally being independent, of suing anybody, of starting a business, of getting a loan. They need a man to do it for them. And that is not old. My parents, my mother could not get a credit card in the 70s in her name. She had to have the embarrassment to get a credit card to have my father, her husband, co-sign that and say to the bank, "Don't worry. If she spends the money, I'll pay it. I'll pay the bill." Because they're like, the woman wants all this money and credit. Oh, we don't know if she'll be able to pay it back. What if she can't pay it back? What are we going to do? Not get the money? Someone's got to be responsible here. This is 1970 freaking 5. This isn't 1775 or 1775 BC. This is 1975. This is your parents' age. And women couldn't get a credit card in their own name because they were not seen as responsible adults. They were not independent. They needed a man to do it for them. So, gentlemen, if you're ever mad, like you don't understand women, why do women mad at you all the time? It's because they're dependent throughout all of their feminist history on idiot men to run their lives. And they don't want that. No more than you want that. They want to be independent on their own. And so the effect of the Code of Hammurabi is that women are considered children. They're not property. And that is the most important thing, because people will say, I will ask in class, and this has been a thing at least since the 60s. I don't know if it's older than that, where I'll go, how are women treated? And people will all say, like property. They're not property at all. I cannot sell my wife the way I can sell my house, the way I could sell my dog, the way I could sell my car. Women are not property. They're not owned by men. They're dependent on men. Now, like, what's the protection for women? What's the protection for my wife? Can I beat my wife? In the ancient world, not today, in ancient Babylon. Can I smack my wife around because she does something wrong? The answer is yes, to a limit. Because if I beat my wife, give her a black eye, right? In the ancient world, not today, and today you go to jail, you should go to jail. I'm talking in the ancient world, in ancient Babylon. What is she going to do? Well, after I do this, after we get into a fight, I give her a black eye. Well, the next day she has lunch with her mom. Because she always has lunch with her mom. Because we all live together. A couple doors down, she has lunch with her mom. And her mom sees the black eye and says, what did you do? And they get into a conversation about it. And then they finish lunch and the mom says, come home and talk to your dad. Talk to your father. Oh, I don't know. Come on, talk to your father. So they come in. And dad, they call in dad from the fields. Dad comes in. It's like, what's up? Hey, how'd you get that? Oh, well, your son-in-law did that. Oh, what did you do? Because there's an understanding that maybe she did something that was worthwhile smacking her in the face for. She'll explain and be like, yeah, no, that's not good. Huh. You know what I'm going to do? Go home. It's okay. I'm going to call up your brothers. I'll talk with them. We'll see what we do. So my wife comes home. And then at 3 a.m., I get a knock on the door. I open it up and it's my brothers-in-law, my 3 brothers-in-law. And they go, bro. And I'm like, you never call me bro. Bro, let's go drinking. Can I say no? No, I have to say yes. It's my bros wanting to take me out drinking at 3 a.m. Their sister has a black eye, but I gotta go drinking with these guys. I can't say no. I gotta go. So I go, and we go drinking, and they make sure I drink a lot. And then, when I'm stumbling around, they beat the shirt out of me. With the message, maybe you shouldn't smack around our sisters so much. You want to see an example of this? Watch The Godfather. This is exactly what happens in The Godfather. The sister's husband beats her, and when the brothers find out, they go and they beat the snot out of him. So, women who have family have protections. I can't sell my wife because her brothers and her father are going to be super mad about that and they're going to take it out on me. I can't beat my wife because I have a wife who has brothers and a father. That's a problem for any jerk, right? So there's limits on on male behavior. If your women also have family to protect them. The women who don't have protections are those whose brothers are gone and fathers have died. No male on their side, no uncle, no brother means no protection. And that's bad for those women. But that's true today if you don't have any family to help you, to back you up. So they're not property. There are protections. There's protections in the law, and there's also protections in society for women. So what protections do they get in the law? So we just talked about society. What protections do they get in the law? They get the protections of being a wife and a mother. They are allowed to be a wife and a mother. That is their job in society, and that job is going to be legally protected. So they get to be a wife. And you go, well, great, they get married. Well, not so easy. Who gets married? When do they get married? How do they get married? A woman is entitled to get married, but who wants to marry the woman? And so virginity becomes valuable. Virginity was valuable before in settled society because, and I've done this in class, I go, who wants to marry a hoe? How many of you want to marry a slut? And I did it for 15 years and nobody ever raised their hand. And I go, great, define a hoe. Define a slut for me. And then all of a sudden the men all turn white. Because they don't have a definition. And they'll give me like a woman who has sex with many men. I'm like, define many. And they're like, and I'm like, okay, ladies, listen to this because he's about to tell you what he thinks about you. And he goes, blah, 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 a lot. I'm like, define a lot. Blah, 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 blah. Because American society doesn't have that definition. Even though all those boys always say they don't want to marry a slut, they can't define what a slut is. Well, until basically the 1960s, there's a definition. And almost every society, except for the awesomely flamboyant Polynesians, in all of these settled societies, there's a definition. And that definition is a woman who has had sex with one person outside of marriage once. If you are a woman who has sex outside of marriage with one person, one time, you are a slut that nobody ever wants to marry. Your father will never be able to marry you off unless he pays a giant amount of money to somebody to take you off his hands. You are a dirty woman. You are besmirched. You see this throughout history all the time, whether it's Shakespeare, whether it's the women in Jane Austen novels or Dickens. You see this. Les Mis, right? I dreamed a dream. She has sex with one man. Now she does it a couple of times over a summer, but it's one person, a man who says, I want to marry you, who she wants to marry. And then he takes off at the end of the summer. Nobody else wants to marry her after that because she has a baby. Nope. So virginity had a monetary value, which gives women possession of their body. Their virginity was worth a gold mina. Now, I don't know what a mina is, but it's a weight of gold. It's serious cash. And if some guy promises, he goes, baby, 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 I love you. I love you so much. I am going to marry you, but I don't have the money right now to impress your father. But I promise I'm going to marry you. But baby, can I get a down payment on that love? And she says, yes, because I love you and I want to marry you and I want you to be the father of my babies. Yes. And then they have a wonderful night together. And in the morning, he's like, baby, I got to leave. I got to go. Papa is a rolling stone. I can't be tied down. That was nice. Thanks a lot. Well, he gets away with it and she's stuck, not able to get married ever again. Well, what the law says, what Hammurabi says is, F you, dude. No, you don't get to act that way. If you make a promise, if you seduce a woman who, of course she's going to believe you. She's a woman. She's silly. She's a child. Of course she's going to believe you. When you promise you're a man, for God's sakes. Don't say things you don't mean. Don't lie. So you have to pay. You have to give in. You're in trouble. And if you can't pay, even worse things are going to happen to you. And the woman is not a slut. She's not. Her name is cleared. Here, I'm going to write right here. Her name is cleared. Anybody can marry her because she was taken advantage of. So virginity becomes possession of a woman's body, becomes a protection. She gets to be a wife, which means as a dad, as a father, I don't want anyone near my daughter. Are you kidding me? Are you out of your mind? It's my daughter. Gonna have the men sniffing around with their hormones and their testosterone. No, I don't want that. But what does the law say? I have to find my daughter a husband. She has a right to be a wife. So she gets to look around. My wife is going to look around. And then they're going to come to me and be like, Daddy, I really want to marry Daniel. And I'll be like, all right, get my shotgun. I'm going to clean my shotgun while he comes over and we have a discussion about this. So he knows I'm serious. And if you have ever dated a country woman, and I don't know if you have, but if you ever have, and I have, you have had a conversation with a daddy before you take their daughter out, and he has a shotgun and or several guns, and he's cleaning them. And he then takes it and he, of course, being a shotgun, he breaks it open. So not the, he's going to send the message, but he doesn't want an accident to happen. Accidentally shooting your daughter's boyfriend is bad for father-daughter relationships. But if you have ever had this, he cracks it open, makes sure he points it, looks down the barrel right at you. When you having her home by? 6:30. Well, you better get going at 6:15 now. But he does have to marry his daughter off. He does have to give her away in the wedding. He does have to do that whether he likes it or not. A woman also has a right to be a mother. And you may go, well, okay, how is that hard? Well, that means a man has to have sex with his wife. And you say, well, okay, that's not a big deal, is it? And it's like, yeah, man, it is a big deal. Because what does that mean? It means you can't go away. It means you can't. Your brother comes up to you and goes, dude, let's go to Babylon. I got this awesome, cool brown stuff I got from Afghanistan. Everybody loves it. They take a little taste, a sniff of it, and they're like, woo! Dude, we'll make a killing. But we'll be gone a year. You want to go? You can't go. You got to say no to that. And your brother's going to be like, dude, we'll make $1 million. Like, no, I can't go because my wife has a right to have a baby. I could get my wife pregnant. What if the king comes along and says, dude, I need men to go to Kadesh. We're going to be gone 3 years. But when we come back, we're going to be rich. We're going to conquer the Hittites. We're going to be awesome. You can't go because your wife has a right to have a baby. If you leave and you're gone 3 years, she don't get a baby. So what we have is a limitation on male behavior. Men can't go off on long distance trade. Men can't go off to war if they're married and they don't have children. Women have a right to a baby. And if you can't give them one, they can divorce your ass. Now, how does that work? Well, they're farmers. 98% of people in the ancient world are farmers. So they thought about things as farmers. Well, if you want something to grow, you got to put the seed in the earth. Very simple. Get the seed, put it in the earth. Something will grow. So you got to put the seed. Who's got the seed? The men got the seed. So, okay. So the men had to put the seed in the earth. There you go. What grows out of the earth is determined by the earth. Once you put the seed in there, the farmer is kind of done. What pops out is determined by the earth itself. So what does this mean? A woman gets pregnant because a man gets her pregnant. But the woman determines whether that child is a boy or a girl. That's the way it is. And that's Henry VIII, right? Henry VIII, it was his job to get his wives pregnant. When they don't get pregnant, he looks bad. He looks infertile. He looks impotent. When they got pregnant, he's like, I got her pregnant because I'm awesome. And he put his hands on his hips and the painter painted it. Hobart painted it. He's like, And then she gave birth to a girl. He's like, you're the problem, woman, Anne Boleyn. You should have given me a boy. And she's like, but I really don't, I don't know how. Like, it's a roll of the dice, man. And he's like, I don't care. It's your fault. There's something wrong with you. Getting a woman pregnant is a man's job. Ooh, the sex of the baby is the woman's job. Now, that turns out not to be true. Well, it turns out to partly be true. You still need the man to get a woman pregnant. You still need the seed. But it turns out that the seed has the genetic code that determines whether it's with a boy or a girl or something else or an other. Or, because there's XXYs and XYYs and there's differences. And that's all in the man's genetic code. The woman is the carrier. It's probably more complicated than that. I'll guarantee you it's more complicated than that, but we're in a history class, not in human reproduction. So, what this does is put limits on male behavior. Women also get a dowry. That when a father marries off his daughter, he gives money to the husband. And you go, he's paying the husband to get rid of the daughter. No. He's paying the money for the daughter so that she has money if she ever wants something. She wants to go buy a Coco Chanel dress. The husband can look at her and go, use your money. That's the dowry. And the dowry sits there and it earns interest, and it's there to keep the wife, the daughter, in a level of lifestyle she is accustomed to. It is for her. She wants to go take a vacation to France. The husband, if he's a jerk, will use your money. And she can. He's not supposed to touch it. It's her money. And in fact, if he divorces her because she can't give him male children, she gets her dowry back. Because he's divorcing her. It's her money. So she doesn't have independence because she doesn't have the ability. She doesn't have the independence under the law. She's a child. But it's like life insurance for my kids or their bank account, or their inheritance from their grandparents. The money is theirs. But it's my job to kind of invest it, to use it in a way that they can use it. So when they turn 20 years old and they want to have a car, I can say, use your money. Use your inheritance money if you want. That's your money. You're an adult. Do you see how this works? Do you kind of see? That's what the purpose of the dowry is. Now, can fathers use it to bribe men to marry their daughters? Yes. Sure. Because the men get to control it. Can unscrupulous men plunder that money and use it as if it's their own? Yes. But those are jerks. And I don't want to talk about the jerks all the time. How about a nice man who loves his wife? The point of the dowry is that she has some form of independence that she can use for herself. So women are not property. They're children. They're not responsible, but they're not property. But even as children, they have these little places that they are totally independent in adults. They have a little bit of money that's theirs. They have possession of their body as an adult woman. They have possession of virginity, which protects them, has a value. And there's limitations on male behavior because of this. Now, what does this do? This limits women to two jobs, wife and mother, and the jobs that come along with that. Child caretaker, farming assistant, husbander, take care of the, milk the goats, milk the cows, right? Feed the chickens. Their options are wife and mother. And that's going to be true all the way into the 18th century when John Stuart Mill and his wife Harriet Taylor Mill basically invent liberalism. And they basically both of them invent feminism by basically arguing that women are more than just wives and mothers. And that's in the 1850s, man. That is 3,000 years later. And they're making the argument saying, maybe, possibly, women are more than wives and mothers. That's Joe in Little Women. And Joe gets married at the end of Little Women. Why? Because women at the time couldn't stand her not being married. Louisa May Alcott didn't want her to be married, but her fans, the people who would write to her, and a lot of this was women, her women fans reading the books, were like, she's got to end up with somebody. She has to be married somehow. She has to have children. She has to. She can't be a spinster. That's terrible. The fans couldn't imagine Joe being a writer and being happy. That's 3,000 years later after Hammurabi. That's how encrusted in society this concept of women as wives and mothers. We'll see it in Islam. We'll see it in other societies where this is the job of women. It becomes protected, but it also becomes insulating, isolating. All right. Next, we have Babylonian warfare. Mesopotamian warfare. The Babylonians are so rich, they basically invent a new type of warfare, and that's the chariots. That's chariot revolution. The chariot is around 2000 BC. It is the first super weapon. What does that mean? It means it is so much more powerful than anything else out there that nothing else competes with it. It is so much more powerful than infantry, than people with spears, that they stop counting power in people and start counting it in chariots. And you see this in the Bible. You see this in the Old Testament. You go from the early kings who have 10,000 troops, 20,000 troops, and then get to Ahab and the later kings, and they have 3,000 chariots or 300 chariots. They don't care about how many troops there are anymore. It's the chariots that matter. So super weapons are expensive because they're new, they're technologically advanced, they're super. And chariots are expensive because the chariot itself is made out of bronze, a lot of it. And the horses are expensive because these are not like little dinky horses that you can use. These are going to be war horses, and they need a lot of food. And they need to be trained to harness. They need to be trained to carry not just a chariot, but two people, a driver and an archer. So, and those, remember, you don't have a lot of land under cultivation, and it's all food for humans. Now you have to leave parts of the Middle East. You have to plow them under. You have to turn them to grass. The horses are used to Central Asia, the high plateau. You have to now turn part of the river valley into high plateau so that it can create the grass that the horses can eat. That's why it's so expensive. You're cultivating a whole new level of food for horses. What does this mean? Only the rich can afford them, which means only the rich matter. Only the rich people within society have enough money to buy the horses, to create the land for the food, and then buy the chariots, and then have the time to train all of them. To train a driver, to train himself as the archer, to train the horses. You need time, and that's expensive. So only rich people matter now, because only they can afford chariots. And the chariots are much more powerful than any other weapon system. You could have 10,000 people. It doesn't matter if the other side has 100 chariots. They will crush those people. So this creates a new legitimacy. It's chariots or nothing. And because only rich people matter, only societies with a lot of rich people matter. So if a typical city of 5,000 people might have 100 rich people, that's great. But Babylon is 250,000, which means they have 5,000 rich people making chariots. So who has more chariots? Who's going to win the wars? And so what happens is you get a balance of power between three big powers: Babylon, Egypt, and the Hittites. Why? So by the world of 1100 BC, you've got Babylon as one of the great powers. Why? because they're a cosmopolitan city. They have trade goods. They make money by selling goods. So they are the richest city on earth. The second is Egypt. Egypt has the Nile. They have agriculture. And remember, 98% of people's work is farming. So they dominate farming. So they could sell their food to anybody. So they're rich. They're the richest country on earth. And then there's the Hittites. The Hittites live in the mountains of Asia Minor. Well, that means they're hillbillies. They shouldn't be able to compete with Babylon and Egypt. But what they have is the metal. They live in the mountains, and that's where the metal is from. See, in the river valleys, the Nile and the Tigris and Euphrates, have flooded over millions of years, which means they've washed all of that mineral wealth away to get the river valley, to get the flatland of the river valley. So the Hittites are living on the minerals, on the tin, on the copper that you need to turn into a bronze chariot. So it means they can sell everybody their mineral wealth, but they can keep enough for themselves that it's cheap. It's like gasoline in Saudi Arabia. You know, the gas price in Saudi Arabia is like 50 cents a gallon. Why? Because they have the oil that turns into the gas. So what they do is they take all the oil they need for themselves, put it aside, and then they take everything else and sell it for a profit. Well, that allows the Hittites to compete at a lower cost. They are a poorer people, but because they own the mineral wealth, their chariots are literally cheaper, half, 2/3 cheaper than Babylon or Egypt, which means they can have as many chariots as Babylon or Egypt, even though they are poorer than Babylon or Egypt. And so these big three are going to fight each other. Boom, boom, boom. We're going to talk about Ramses and fighting the Hittites way up in Kadesh, which is in modern Syria, on the border of Syria and Turkey today. It's way north. It's 800 miles north of Egypt. And then the world ends. The first apocalypse happens. The Bronze Age collapse happens around 1000 BC. Every major civilization on Earth, China and India, the Middle East, Egypt, all collapse. Why? Climate change. Something happened that changed the climate, that made food for nomads hard to get. Nomads needing food got on the move. They bumped into other nomads. Those nomads got pushed into less desirable areas. They moved. They're looking for food. They moved into settled zones. The settled zones have food. Now they're burned. Those people are on the move. They move into other settled zones. They burn those cities down, and everybody gets on the move. This is where Exodus comes from. The story of the Hebrews leaving Egypt on the move and wandering for 40 years looking for a homeland. That's the Bronze Age collapse. That's the memory of the Bronze Age collapse. Every major civilization is wrecked. This is a trauma for the Mesopotamian world. See Exodus. Exodus is a trauma. It's a triumph because they get out of Egypt, but it's also a trauma of wandering the universe, wandering the world, looking for a homeland, and having to fight every freaking day, trying to find and carve out a new homeland. It's a trauma for people. Now, the world will settle back down by about 900 or so. People will settle down, but a lot of things are wrecked, and they start anew. And in our next chapter, we're going to talk about the winners. The first winner, the first people who get their act together, who recover from this, who are totally traumatized, and who recover are going to be the Assyrians, who are going to build an army that is built to never lose. They're going to invent terrorism. They're going to invent modern warfare. They are going to be They are what would have happened had the Nazis won the Second World War. That's the Assyrians. Violent, tough, efficient, and devastating. And the people hated them. And that's our next chapter. Good luck. Be careful. See you soon. Bye.